Welcome to the Rider's Edge podcast, a platform to share conversations about the health and wellness of horse and rider. I'm your host, Farley Schweigert. Hey y'all, it's Farley with the Rider's Edge podcast, and today we're going to take another episode, hashtag in the arena 365. Today you're going to go in the arena, in the rope pen actually, and we're going to talk about what's been going on lately on my journey back into the rope pen. So I started blogging about this back in the winter, pre-COVID, about different aspects of returning to roping after a long time away from it. And so to kind of catch you up, I dabbled around with roping when I was a kid. Obviously, there's a rope pen in my front yard. That's what I grew up doing. My dad's a team roper. My brother is team roped and ropes calves, and it's what we do. And I breakawayed in high school and after PT school some, but never had an opportunity to really buckle down and be serious with it due to, career, job, schooling, no calves, no horse, whatever. And now I do. Now I have the opportunity to. I was able to go to one of Joe Beaver's schools back in January, which was great. He's a wonderful teacher and just makes things so simple. Where I may or may not complicate things every once in a while. But what I really liked about Joe's approach is it's a lot how I think about horsemanship and running barrels as well. And it only takes a few things to actually get the job done. So as of this recording, we're at the end of July 2020. And I've had calves for the past couple weeks, and the climate I feel like is changing, and at least here in Arkansas we're getting seems like there's still 12 inches of rain every 3 days, and so getting consistent time in the arena has been definitely a challenge this year. With that being said, I've been chute roping a lot. I've got a water tub out there, and we're loading the calves and chute roping when I can't actually rope, and trying to continue to progress that way. Well, it's been going pretty well, honestly, which if it was staying that well, we probably wouldn't be having a podcast now, would we? It's been going really well. Been really working on, what I like about chute roping is that I can work on some of my kinks and my issues without putting a lot of stress and strain on horses and on cattle, because they're not really having to work that hard at all. So I've been chute roping about every day, and it was really going good. Really getting consistent, felt really good, and just getting good results. And then had one day where I typically run 2 pins, and so had caught 9 out of 10 calves. And the next day, just cracker jack, roped the first 3 out of the gate. And then I got a little sassy in my brain. Little big britches of, look at all the things that I've done myself and I'm accomplishing. Well, what happens when you get sassy in the brain is that everything goes to pot. And so it takes several calves to get that worked back out to where you are doing the 3 things it takes. It only takes 3 things to get this done for me. And so it was a great mental revelation, because it goes to the old cliche of one run at a time, which is absolutely true. But that didn't really click in my brain. What clicked in my brain for me is that every run is a new run. And it's the exact same meaning, it's the exact same thing, but just switching those words around, I was like, oh, it has your previous run has nothing to do with your present run, and your future run has nothing to do with your present run. And you have to accomplish your 3 tasks on that run, on that calf, doing the best you can with the situation you're handed. Every run's a new run. Whether it's a one-header or you get to have 10 days in Vegas, every run's a new run. So, worked through that, and that was a great light bulb for me this week. And then what happened was, I started making some silly mistakes, started missing, I'd either top knot or skip it over the top, or really feel myself. I have a bad habit of leaning forward, really leaning forward, trying to lay it on them, because as we all know, if we try to lay it on the 9th time, it will work better than the first time we tried it. Said no roper ever. And so, I had some days that roping was probably mediocre to poor for the kind of high standards that I end up keeping for myself, that sometimes are impossibly too high, but in this case are just high. And so I would ruminate on what was going on, and it dawned on me that it was a physical issue. So I have, and I've talked about this before, I've have a chronic SI issue myself. Years ago, I was running barrels, and my stirrup broke at the first barrel right when I went to sit down. And, I sat down pretty hard, but, with no problem finishing the run with just one stirrup, and it all worked out fine. And the next day, I bent over to pick up the water hose, and I couldn't move. And, therapists don't always make the best patients. I was in PT school at the time, and we would work on it a little bit, but then we would go back to studying or whatever. And so it's plagued me for a long time, and the same thing would happen throughout my career. We'd work on it when we had time in between patients, because one bad thing about being a PT is that you can't always work on yourself. And so it's been pretty stable. I don't have a lot of symptoms usually. But I noticed that having fatigue and not having my strength symmetrical through my core, through my right and left sides of my core. And your core is, it's your pelvis, it's your pelvic floor, it's your abdominals, your back extensors, and even your diaphragm. And it makes a nice little house. It has a lot of layers to the foundation. Because I started getting some pain in my right hip. And your hip's different than your SI, or your hip, I'm talking about the ball and socket joint of your hip. And it just dawned on me, I'm having trouble roping because I don't physically, and people consider me strong. I don't think I'm a weak person by any means, but I don't have the correct muscle firing, the correct neuromuscular balance, the correct balance of strength through my core to do what I need to do. Roping is a lot like pitching a baseball, and that power comes through your pelvis, it comes through your hips. I would argue that roping is more strenuous on the body than pitching. The only exception is the sheer velocity that the pitcher has to get the ball up to. But a pitcher is standing on the ground, which is stationary, throwing at a stationary object. And again, the velocity, it has to be there, different from roping, but everything's stationary. When you're roping, you are on a moving object, swinging a rope at a moving target. So there's a lot more variability. And while the velocity may not be there, the amount of torque that is going on the shoulder, if you think about how your swing comes around there with your shoulder, it puts a lot of strain through there. So for me, I've still been building up my shoulder, not only working on the rotator cuff, but making sure the middle and lower trap is activated and working correctly. And I was real diligent early last week, into the middle of last week, and really got to roping the middle of last week and all through the weekend. And like any normal human being, I quit doing my exercises as frequently. And now exercises can be, they don't have to be at a CrossFit level where you're huffing and puffing and just drenching sweat. Exercises can be mindful movement. It can be, in this case, working on the neuromuscular firing pattern and establishing that. And then we're going to work on the strengthening and the hypertrophy of muscles, and working through that aspect of it. It's not enough to just go through the movement. You've got to get those muscles coordinated. The human body is going to find a way to get the job done. I know how to swing a rope. I know how to get my tip down over my target and deliver with a handshake. But if I can't physically do that every time, my body's going to start creating compensations. And that's where the train runs off the tracks. Because if I just do what I want to do, which is continue to shoot rope and continue to work through it, or try to work through it, shoot roping, it's going to lead me down a path of head games. It's going to lead me down a path of bad physical habits that will become ingrained. And the longer you ingrain a habit, the longer it takes to reverse it. And it's just going to lead me down a bad path, Ricky Bobby. So I did the mature thing. I did some adulting. And instead of getting up before work this morning and shoot roping, I got up before work and went and did some exercises. Because getting 2 rounds of mediocre roping in this weekend, my hip was achy. My low back was achy right on the right side, right above the back of my hip. And I just knew that I was collapsing. Fatigue was setting in. So anytime that happens for me personally, and this may be the case for you if you think back to your roping or riding, if I get fatigued in my core, I try to shorten it, because if I shorten my core, it doesn't have to work as hard, and so I can cheat my way through that. Again, the body doesn't find this as cheating; it finds this as being efficient in getting the task done, because it's always a matter of getting the task done of survival. So I found that I was shortening up. I was leaning forward, and I was collapsing over on the right side. Well, then there's sure as shoot not any power coming from the core. It's all relying on your shoulder. Well, if your shoulder's not exactly up to par either at that moment, then you don't have a snowball's chance. And so why would I continue to torque on my shoulder and torque on that hip instead of pausing, taking it back to the gym, taking it back to the table, working on it, and then going back? Does that mean I'm going to stay a month out of the rope pen? No, but I'm going to stay several days out of the rope pen. Start the snowball going in the correct direction, and then maybe add 1 pin of calves in. See how that goes, and then change it around, and then hopefully, if the rope horse is sound, change it around again and start adding some of that back in. But I tell you all this in the arena story to say this. It's hard. It's hard to have that mental maturity to look at yourself and go, you know what, I need to step back and fix this. Because when we know better, we do better. And it doesn't have to be this 1970s, 1980s, just rope through it, grit through it kind of thing. Because what we know about roping is that practicing roping only practices roping. Practicing roping only gets you the muscle memory, the neuromuscular patterns, the technique, the timing. It does nothing to strengthen your shoulder. In fact, you could probably argue that it weakens your shoulder if you don't have exercises in place to counterbalance your roping. It's the same thing with pitching or any other kind of overhead sports. And so I can't just grit through it. I've got to stop and work smarter in order to get stronger, to expedite these issues and get back towards my goals and where I'm going, and to look at my long-term health. Potentially, if I kept down that path, you're looking at possibly a rotator cuff surgery, possibly a hole running through the rotator cuff. And in 30 years down the road, you're looking at possibly a total hip replacement. Because if the soft tissue is not there to support the joint, then the next line of defense is the ligaments of the joint. And as they wear down, then you have the joint surfaces themselves where the cartilage is. And as the cartilage wears down, there is more friction that leads to particles kind of becoming loose in there, osteoarthritis setting up. As that continues down the path, you eventually lead towards a total joint replacement. And while I've never had to experience one of those personally, I have rehabbed a lot of patients with total hip and total knee and some shoulders. And while we can joke about, oh, I'll turn into the bionic woman or man, they can just put a new joint in and I can go back doing what I'm doing. It sometimes doesn't work that way. Sometimes it does. We have great advancements in total hip replacements and total joints, but it's a hell of a lot of work on the rehab. There's no way to predict how the body's going to react to it because you're putting a foreign body in there. And sometimes it takes a while for the body to adjust to that. So it's not something that I really want to experience. I would rather not, and continue to get better and stronger through there so that I can rope the way I know I can rope. I can protect my health for the long game, and I can protect my horse's health for the long game. Because if my core becomes more symmetrical in strength and muscle memory and muscle firing, then my horse doesn't have to offset his gait and travel to accommodate me. And then they don't end up having to have as many long-term treatments, effects, and we can increase the longevity of our horses, which is always a goal for us. So it's a twisted, connected snowball. between your health all the way to your horse's health and then all the way over to your performance goals. So I'm just here to tell you that it's not always classy. It is always classy, but it's not always fun. It's not always sexy being in the practice pen, because sometimes you've got to make the adulting choices of taking a step back, looking at what's actually going on, and doing the smart play for the long haul and adjusting what you're doing to be better for everybody involved. So if hopefully that helps my stories continue to help you on your journey, whether it's in the rope pen, the barrel pen, the show pen, or even the jumping pen for that matter. And if you're sitting there going, this really makes sense, but I don't know where to start, send me a message. You can find me at ridersedgetherapy.com. Send me a message and we'll start looking at, we can set up a chat to look at what's going on with your performance and help you with the program for performance enhancement, not only for your health, but your horse's health as well. So you can check me out there or find me on Facebook or Instagram at Rider's Edge Therapy and Wellness. I would love to connect with you and help you through your performance needs. So, thanks for listening. I really enjoy the off-the-cuff in the Arena 365 conversations we get to have. And as always, I will see you down the road. Thank you for listening to Rider's Edge Podcast. For show notes and other thoughts, head over to ridersedgetherapy.com. If you would like to stay connected and continue the conversation, head over to my free Facebook group, Rider's Edge Health and Wellness for Horse and Rider. Thanks for continuing the conversation, and as always, I will see you down the road.